the book Losing June. It's a novel, and I want to thank you for publishing it with Onion River Press. Onion River Press is part of the Pheonix books, and it was designed by Rachel Fisher, who's the publishing manager, and myself about 7 years ago. And it's really designed to give local people a venue and an avenue for getting a book printed. And so we really appreciate you using us and coming to us, and now we have this great book, which is awesome. Catherine's going to talk a little bit, and then she'll do a little bit of a reading, and she'll answer all your questions.
I will,
yeah,
all of them.
Every single one of them. So
all
start thinking about them now. And then once the question and answer period is done, I'm going to grab her, and I know you're going to want to talk to her, but I'm going to take her right upstairs, as we're going to sit her down behind a table, and you guys can get her book personalized and signed. We have lots of copies for you to purchase up there. So I hope that you'll do that. I hope you'll have a great time, and please welcome Catherine Bodnar.
I see a lot of familiar faces, and I just want to thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's really just amazes me, actually, to have such a group. And long time working on this book, 12 years. So it was mostly, I think, learning how to write fiction. And it's not as easy as it looks, really. Fiction is a pretty tough thing. I taught fiction, and I taught nonfiction for 30 years at the college level. And I can still say that I'm not necessarily a good storyteller. So it takes a while to learn how to hold back, I think, those things. Come on down. Don't worry about making a little noise. Hi, Kiefer. Hi, Brian and Emily. Hi, Sylvia. Thank you for coming. Do we have some more? Hi, Brian. Family members. It's wonderful, really. So anyway, starting to talk about this book, just to put it out there, it was a friend of mine said on a dare, why don't you write a novel for this contest that we're having? And I'm like, I haven't written a novel before. I haven't even written a short story before. She said, oh, you'll do great. You'll do great, just because she was one of the judges. And I said, well, all right. So I decided to try it. And it turned out that I wasn't very good at it. So it takes a lot of learning. Now, if I had gone through the MFA program, I probably would have known a lot more, but instead I went through the doctoral program and had to pretty much start from the beginning. One of the biggest differences, I think, between writing fiction and nonfiction is that when you write fiction, you try to be really clear and say what you mean and say it as clearly as possible without leaving anything out. And fiction is completely different because it's like you leave out the most important things. Sort of like watercolor, where you leave those blank places because you want the reader to come to those places on their own through the suggestions and through the hints and the way that you write the story, really. You hope that the reader gets it. And in a couple of writing workshops where what I agonized through, it was like you are insulting the intelligence of the reader if you tell them too much, right? So I then had to learn how to hold back. And I think that I think that I've done a pretty good job of it. You probably won't know what you're reading, but no, you will, because I'll be telling you. But I like to say that I didn't have an idea for the book when she first dared me to write it, and as I started thinking, I started realizing that there was a place and a time that I really wanted to write about. But I was only 8 years old at the time, and that was 1959. and I was in Spirit Lake, Mount St. Helens, with my family. So we had gone there to help my aunt and uncle run the inn. And not that I had much to do except to just be at the candy counter, 8 years old, you know. So I didn't really learn a lot. I had to research most of what I needed to come up with to write this story. But I knew that I wanted to tell it through my brother's point of view, because I couldn't even begin to contrive an 8-year-old point of view. So it wasn't too easy to contrive his either. But he was right at the age of just turning 16, which was a perfect coming of age time. And I had done a lot of studying about Joseph Campbell's books on the heroes and archetypes, and really how you can create a hero by stripping away what they think they know. And so James was from the East, and he went to the West with the family, and he thought he knew a lot. But when you get into the Pacific Northwest, I think just about anybody would realize that you don't know anything. You have everything to learn. And then it was different than it is now. Then everything was moist, and there was fog and mist everywhere. There was rain every day. And the main thing that I came away with was what a wet place this is. And as we now know, it's losing a lot of that quality. And it really fired me up even more to want to take readers back to what it used to be like. Because it's not only was Spirit Lake right next to Mount St. Helens, and in 1959, that was 20 years from erupting. But it was also Spirit Lake was a place with just many, many legends about it. It was a place where a lot of Native Americans had their sacred ground. And so when I started researching, I found that I had to go in a lot of different directions. I had to learn about volcanology. I had to learn about the different tribes that had lived there. I had to learn just pretty much everything that I didn't know about logging and mining and what was happening there. What was happening there was that the volcano was a very active volcano. Some of you know about Mount St. Helens. Yes, I see some people nodding. And we have to be at least a certain age to remember about Mount St. Helens. So it was a devastating eruption. It was an eruption that was far and away beyond any that we've had in this country before. And it was a landslide that was the biggest in recorded history. It sent rocks, huge rocks, 8 miles up into the sky. It was just really nothing that they had planned on. This was because it was fired by gas, and a lot of them are lava-based. So you have a gentle kind of lava flow out. Not with Mount St. Helens. It shot gas right at this amazing little inn called Harmony Falls. Harmony Falls Lodge had 10 cabins, and it had been there since the turn of the last century. And it was a place where generations of families stayed and came and spent the summertime. None of them ever thought about the volcano erupting because word was out that it was dormant. How could it possibly be anything but dormant when it's covered with ice? You know, they just couldn't quite put that together. But the geologists were telling us, the Indians were also telling us that this volcano had erupted every year, and that it was one of the most active volcanoes in the whole rim of fire. And so sure enough, even 20 years, which is like a blip in geological time, it was boiling down there, miles down it was boiling. And when I realized that, and I realized how much fun everyone was having in the lake, and water skiing, and just, it was a beautiful place. Nobody was thinking about this, Armageddon that was bearing down on them. I mean, you're in the lake practically with the volcano. And so nobody really worried. But what I thought about as I started thinking about the story was that it's kind of like the human condition. Because here we are all playing and having fun, and aren't we having fun? Having just a riot. And, of course, we have the weight of mortality bearing on us in the same way that Mount St. Helens was bearing on everyone there. And so it was like I needed to look through a kind of portal to see what it was like before St. Helens had erupted and changed everything. And I mean, I don't know if any of you have seen any of the pictures of what happened after it erupted, but huge 1,000-year-old trees were shaved off at the base and just all fell into Spirit Lake. And the whole area for miles was devastated. And so I kind of thought about what kind of a story takes place inside these parameters. It's one that I'm asking you, the readers, to look at without thinking about the volcano erupting. Because if you think about it erupting, then it seems to me like the story doesn't have the sense that it would otherwise, because it's already destroyed. And if you go back and look for it for today, if you go back and you look, try to find Harmony Falls, which was 100 feet high, and now it's 8 feet high. And that's how, the effect of this. So this is truly a place, it's like a never, never land. We cannot go back and see it. Even if we want to, it's not available for us. And so in fact, everyone that was in the book of my family is dead. Okay, not so unreasonable. It's been 60 years since then. But it also caused me to want to revisit and maybe even rewrite their stories a little bit. And so that's what I did with this. My mother was there. My brother James was there. My aunt and uncle were there running the lodge. And my cousin Tess was there. Now, her name was Cass, but it changed to Tess for the book. Well, because a couple of these people had died violently, in one case suicide, it really made me want to go back and rewrite those stories. And in the case of some, to give them a story that they hadn't had. So that's part of what's happening. The other part of what's happening is that in my research, I read a lot about Portland and what was going on with the coastal cities in the 50s and in the 20s. It was not pretty. There was a lot of corruption. Some of you might have heard about the McClellan Committee, where Bobby Kennedy went in and arrested about over 100 criminals and tried to haul them back to Washington to arrest them. But they pretty much all got away with it because the witnesses were so unreliable. The whole system was so corrupt. But in these places, Seattle, San Francisco, Portland, Los Angeles, these cities were rife with what they called white slavery. It's not called that now, but it was then. And that was really an involuntary kind of prostitution where kids or teens were kidnapped. And a lot of them were taken then into into prostitution. If you've ever been to Portland, you know about these tunnels that are underground. And they were devised to take the food that would come in from the port to the restaurants. But they were complicated. They were also using them to transfer people, to traffic people. So I thought of this, amazingly innocent and lovely inn, Harmony Falls Lodge, and not only the volcano with its, of course, inevitability, but also the crime that was going on. And if you remember some of the songs that, if you go to San Francisco, be sure to wear a flower in your hair. That strikes me as odd because a lot of those kids never came back. And they ended up as victims of this white slavery. So I wanted to tell a story that would embed the crime as well as the innocence and the beauty, and see how it would all work out together. Lou Witt was what St. Helens used to be called. It's the Indian name for it. And it also used to be called Death Mountain because a lot of people did die on the mountain. A lot of Native Americans thought white people were crazy to be on that mountain above the timberline because from their point of view, it was unsafe because of their legends that these 4 volcanoes all had warring spirits. And so they were taught to stay off of the tip of the volcano because it could happen anytime. So they only went as far as the timberline, and they camped there. They'd had their vision quests there. And so I did a lot of reading about the rituals and the traditions of them. And it made me think about this whole area was so rich with legend, with death, beauty, a beauty that we can never attain again. So the story went through a lot of different changes because I joined some writing workshops, and those can be really tough on new writers. You may know, son's back there nodding his head. Yes, Caper, it's true. They can be very tough on because they're not always supportive. Sometimes they, I think writers like to show off with each other. We're a very competitive group of people. But it made me kind of rewrite the story again and again from different points of view, with different characters. My initial story that I wrote, and I wrote it many times, always had a dead woman's body in the waterfall. Why? I'm not sure. But I thought perhaps it was because I was trying to sell books. And I needed a little sensational, I need a body in there somewhere. Yeah, and of course it was a woman. Of course she was a bathing suit, half on and half not. You go for it, right? But the problem is it didn't go anywhere. And even though I changed her name and I changed her relationship to James and I tried to make it work, I gotta get this dead body in there. It just didn't work. It didn't go anywhere. Where's it going to go? She's dead, So I had to really come up with some different options on that one. And that was part of the early drafting. The early drafting really sucked. Excuse me. Son again nods his head. Yes, it did. And many of you read some of the early versions too. And I just hats off to you because my idea is that the people that read the early versions of a novel are really nice people because they are handed a bunch of crap basically, and then they're asked to find something good about it. And they might find a little bit of a, oh, here's a gem here, or here's a good image or whatever here. But for the most part, it hasn't been put together. And so it's a difficult role. And I had some really good friends and some good people that helped me without hurting my feelings too much, that I had to keep reworking it. And people that know me know, I think my grandson is 12. Are you 12? Yeah. Finnegan's 12. Okay, so that must have, I started that book the year you were born. Look how tall he is. Yes. And that was really because of my drive to want to get it right, but also sometimes my feeling that it was just very wrong and it wasn't going to work. I tried to go through some conferences and see agents, and the agent said, well, is it YA? Well, not really. Well, is it a thriller? Is it in other words, I could not find the exact genre that would have been a really quick and easy, yeah, take that. And so I didn't get a publisher. And I realized that I wanted to publish it myself. This place offers that option, which is amazing because we're a small town here, and it's a really special thing to have all of you people here to listen and support me. You wouldn't find that in New York City, you can be sure of that. And so I feel like I made the right choice, and since January we've been working on, Rachel, thank you very much, working through it, just trying to figure out what today would actually look like. And there was an awful lot to do. We have an audio book that we've had made, and we have some wonderful people here that are filming it, and we'll make sure it's all on the places that it needs to be. I have people that write social media for me, and everyone's gathered together to basically make this happen. Okay, so I'll read my, Dave, really? No questions? Okay, well, let me just say that there's a couple of characters in here that are critical. June, definitely, and James. And when we first meet June, she's, I'll just say that she's kind of on her own trip. She's been kidnapped, all right? So she's doesn't really know where she is, and she's 10. The story is basically told in third person, close, through James. But I drop in these cameo roles that are really deep dives into certain points of view. When I can't get at the point of view any other way, then this is the way that I do it. So this is June. As if at the bottom of a deep well, she feels too heavy to swim to the surface. When she tries to open her eyes, her lids stick closed by something tight around her head. Slowly moving each limb and finger, she runs down a delirious checklist and finds her body parts in order. She has journeyed far in her sleep, flying through confetti clouds at the speed of light, soaring over the moon, yet she knows she hasn't moved from this hard pallet. All this is a dream anyway. It has to be. Her hands are tied with soft ribbons, and she is trying to sit up when Max climbs up to her, heaving like an old man, saying, "Hey, Angel, I thought I heard you stir." She flinches as his flat, rough fingers graze her cheek and forehead. She can feel him smoothing her loose hairs out of her face. It feels nice, like when her mother does it. "You sure are a pretty thing. Do you know that?" She feels his gaze and his light touch on her legs. She had thought it was salamanders. It was so light. His breath comes close, and she can feel its damp warmth. Then it moves away. "I'm sorry I have to keep you tied like this, honey. It's for your own safety." "Hey, guess what? I've got some chocolates." She listens as he unwraps them and places one on her lips. She opens her mouth to accept it. "That's right. Take 'em, one at a time." When she bites into it, the center of the chocolate bursts with the bitterness of turned cranberries, kind of sticky like caramel. Every bite releases sugary dark chocolate. She chews carefully, one at a time, slower and slower, heavier still as she gets to the third one. Then she slips off, tingling, her ship launching from some distant shore. So, she is, obviously June will appear in a lot of different ways. She won't always be opiated. But at these drop-in times, there's no other way that I can get into her mind but like this. The other main character, and there's a few characters you're going to love. Some that aren't family members that I made up completely, and they're really great. They really are. So now this is James, and James is right now on the side of the volcano, and he's there because he's he's troubled. He's got a bad conscience, and he's looking for some answers. It's a quest, and he's been shown what to do and how to handle it, but at this point, he's alone. James scraped a kitchen match on dry rock and lit the scraggly mound of sagebrush, setting off tiny crackling fireworks. He was alone now, and he had work to do. Burning sage readied the campsite, Ben had explained. James lit a compressed sage bundle, releasing a fragrant smoke that James inhaled deeply. He took out a packet of Gloria's herbs called death camas. Not edible like the blue camas, an Indian staple, death camas was believed by natives to form a magical barrier when its dried flowers were crushed and sprinkled around the perimeter of a campsite, protecting it from harm. James took small handfuls and spread them, doubly protecting his site. Ben had found this spot years ago, he said, for his spiritual journey. It satisfied the requirements. The ledge was remote and rugged and perilously exposed to the elements. It was nature at her most dramatic, most inspirational. Sacred places, Ben had said, often call the creation to mind. For hours, James sat so still that nature lost interest in him. Cross-legged, gazing out over an infinity of cirrus clouds, sitting below the timberline on the volcano's flank was traditionally where Cowlitz Indians camped on their quests, so they wouldn't offend Lewitt's often angry spirits. Squirrels rustled in some bushes, making soft barking noises, and tiny chipmunks scurried far from him. A cold wind gusted close by, sending a fast shudder through James. Suddenly, he heard drumming. Sitting high in the clouds, staring at the small flame, somehow transported him to another time. James felt a deep kinship with others who had sat there before him, on the side of a powerful young volcano. What would be the way of his life? James lifted his face to the sky, opening to answers. He lay back on the ledge, counting clouds. As he breathed the pine-scented air, he exhaled fully. How could he leave Spirit Lake? His body was rooted like the great forests and streams. His heart beat with the wild. It was unthinkable to leave. And without giving too much away there, I'll just kind of let you imagine what it is that he has to, why he has to leave, and if he has to leave, and if so, where he's going. There's so much to say about this book. It's questions.